By any traditional measure, James Buchanan was one of the best qualified men ever to hold the presidency. Known fondly, if not altogether flatteringly, as the old public functionary, beginning in the 1810s, he had served in the Pennsylvania state legislature, in both the House of Representatives and the Senate, as ambassador to Russia under Andrew Jackson, Secretary of State under James Polk, and ambassador to Britain under Franklin Pierce, before his election to the nation's highest office in 1856. Although Northern by birth, his support for Southern interests, including the protection of slavery, was staunch, lifelong, and untainted, at least in public, by any evidence of moral doubt. As president, he behaved like a sort of maiden aunt, a national mollifier who disliked confrontation, and felt genuinely distressed when states, like badly behaved children, were at each other's throats. Yet he had presided over one debilitating crisis after another: guerrilla warfare in Kansas, the inflammatory Dred Scott decision, the wildfire spread of Southern paranoia following John Brown's 1859 raid, and now the incendiary aftermath of Abraham Lincoln's election, which sent South Carolina hurtling toward secession. By December 1860, he was a lame duck facing the country's worst calamity ever. Secession fever was sweeping South Carolina and percolating across the rest of the Deep South. Radical speakers were telling wildly cheering crowds that Lincoln's election would lead to a race war that could be forestalled only by a united South that was prepared to defend itself and the slavery on which it depended, with rifle and bayonet if necessary. In Charleston, the Stars and Stripes was everywhere replaced by the state's palmetto flag. Young and old flocked to join the militia. Even children delivered secession speeches to their playmates and strutted the streets like soldiers. At the direction of the pro-secession Secretary of War John Floyd, tens of thousands of weapons were shipped to the South from federal arsenals in the North. A new military committee in South Carolina was laying plans to fortify the coastline, and foreign consuls were said to be waiting for secession to open negotiations for recognition. The governor of Alabama called for the immediate secession of his state, as did Senator Robert Toombs of Georgia. From Virginia to Texas, volunteer units were arming. In his last State of the Union address on December 3rd, Buchanan spoke as if lost in a political funk, retailing rhetorical bromides that swayed no one anymore. "The country has been eminently prosperous in all its material interests," he declared sunnily. "The general health has been excellent, our harvests have been abundant, and plenty smiles throughout the land." He then asked, "Why is it, then, that discontent so extensively prevails?" The answer was simple. It was all the abolitionists' fault. Incessant and violent agitation against slavery had wrought a malign influence on the slaves and inspired them with vague notions of freedom. As a result, white Southerners lived in terror of a servile insurrection. All that the slave states wanted, he asserted, was to be left alone to manage their domestic institutions in their own way. Instead, he claimed, many a matron throughout the South retires at night in dread of what may befall herself and her children before the morning. In truth, if any whites in the South lived in real terror, it was those few who dared to publicly imply, even inadvertently, that there was anything wrong with slavery. In the months since John Brown's raid, reports of lynchings, assaults, and the tar and feathering of hapless travelers, Yankee peddlers, and dissenters had steadily percolated northward. Vigilantes arrested white strangers for being seen in conversation with Negroes, drove out Northern-born schoolteachers, and tore open the U.S. mail in search of subversive literature. A South Carolina stonecutter was stripped naked, beaten, and covered with hot tar for having been heard to say that slavery caused white workers to be looked down upon. A Virginian was almost lynched in Alabama when he attempted to pass a banknote from Massachusetts. A daguerreotypist was beaten because one of his samples was a picture of Abraham Lincoln. A Mississippian was hanged for wearing a red sash, the supposed symbol of a non-existent secret abolition society.